Pain radiated through him. The flashing lights of the ambulance were blinding as his vision dimmed. People were shouting, but their words were muffled. He was dying. And he knew it. Everything turned black. A brilliant light shone as he found himself held in unfamiliar arms and a smiling woman cradling him. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. Happy New Year. So, why don't we talk about reincarnation? A second lease on life. The idea of a second life after death is fairly common. You see it in Hinduism, where both gods and Rakshasa have been reborn as humans. It is so common that there is a whole genre of anime and manga called Isekai, or otherworld stories, where something happens which brings your protagonist into a new world, usually a fantasy setting. Often the person is sent there by divine intervention or fluke. Sometimes the hero is summoned to another world by magic. We also have literature like Alice in Wonderland and a Yankee in King Arthur's court. But I'd like to just look at those who were born again. I want to look at the neurology of such a situation. What would be going through your head? When would you understand what is happening? First thing we need to look at is, sadly, how you die. After all, you can't be reincarnated if you are still alive. Now, your cause of death could be natural or accidents. But wouldn't you think death would be traumatic? And that is what I am touching on. During a particularly traumatic event, people often suffer memory loss. Doubly so when there is a brain injury. And that means it is likely that your memory may have holes in it, particularly those of how you died. That can create issues a bit later. Sadly, we now need to look at the hotly debated topic of when a person is a person. After reincarnation, when do you become aware of your existence? Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. When does a baby first show brain activity? Ready for some developmental biology? The first nerve cells become neurons at about 5 weeks. At the same time, the neural tube will form and close up at 6 weeks. But we can't attest to the presence of thoughts. But week 10, there is a brain. It'll be smooth and not segmented into lobes, and none of the folds. It is between weeks 7 and 8 where the earliest synapses form, and there are electrical currents detected. At this point, it is most likely where you might realize something is happening. What the timeline is between death and this point is unknown. Your thoughts may not be well formed. Now, at 8 weeks, spontaneous movements can be seen in ultrasounds. If these are coordinated movements, or just random movements, muscles twitching, we don't know, just that there is motion. Early muscles either way. By the end of the first trimester, there is a range of movements and facial expressions, such as stretching, kicking, sucking of the thumb, yawning, and more. This is also when your sense of touch comes along. At this point, the baby's body is generally human-shaped, but only about 2 inches or 5 centimeters long. All the organ systems are formed and still developing. In the second trimester, things get fun. Around 21 weeks, a normal baby will sip on its amniotic fluid, mostly urine, and will help establish taste. Yeah, not the best first taste, but it is what you'll have. The eyes will open around 26 weeks. Mostly just darkness there. Maybe some shades of red if under a bright enough light, but that would be rare. At 28 weeks, the nerves are mostly developed, and that means responses. The baby can hear well enough to pick up sounds outside of the womb, and will even turn its head towards the sounds, usually the mother's voice. That is also when the brain waves report REM sleep. I don't know what sort of dreams a baby would be having here. It is the hearing which is important. It is around 30 weeks when language learning starts. They can pick up on the rhythmic patterns of speech and sound. This means they can recognize their parents' language. A study that came out in 2007 by the University of Kansas used bilingual mothers that spoke English and Japanese. The baby responds differently to their mother's language than to a different language. To the English-only mothers, their baby responded to Japanese the same way that they did to a fire engine or a dog. Use this time to learn your new parent's language. So chances are that you may become aware of your new body around 8 to 13 weeks, with varying levels of awareness. Remember, your brain isn't fully functional and may not be able to accept your full mental faculties right away. Your mind will slowly begin to reform, with full cognition maybe appearing around 30 weeks. The third trimester is less about developing things and more about growing, and things are relatively still until birth. Immediately after being reborn, you'll start breathing. Babies' first cries are to help get respiration working right. Now, immediately after birth, your vision is going to be limited. It is the same thing that happens to minors after being trapped in a mine shaft for weeks. You've never used your eyes. Your visual field is only a couple of inches. Colors come in the first few weeks, but you won't be able to distinguish shades in good color vision around 5 months. Facial recognition comes around 2 to 3 months. Around 3 to 4 months, they can see a couple feet away and is fully functional around 1 year, but hand-eye coordination won't be ready yet. Coordination will come in time. Your muscles won't be developed, and it'll take time to build up the strength. So squirm about. Kick and flail your arms. Rock about to build up your core. You won't have the coordination at first. Your nerves may not be set up the exact same in your new body as your old. Take your time to get yourself retrained. Generally, a baby will start rolling over at 3 to 4 months. Sitting comes about 8 months. Crawling is between 6 and 10 months normally, and walking between 9 to 12 months roughly. These will be your goals to shoot for after birth. Most of your time will be spent sleeping at first, and you'll need it. Sleep and eat to grow. Language will come in a bit. From birth to 4 months, a baby will make the first vowel sounds as they gain coordination of their tongues and lips. Between 4 and 6 months, you'll get most of the consonants, but the mouth won't have formed well enough for effective speaking until a bit older, 7 to 9 months. You'll get babbling in basic words. Most languages aren't random. They are shaped around the first words babies speak: ma, pa, mom, dad, oma, opa. Overall, you won't come out speaking, and will need a few months to a year before you can speak. But be sure to babble to refine your vocal muscles while growing. So you'll be busy. How fast you develop will depend on a few things. How well your memories come over. You'll probably have some memory loss, but your brain won't fully form until mid-20s. But most major brain structures are formed around 9 years. This is important. Just because you were an adult upon death doesn't mean that you'll think like one with reincarnation. Your new brain isn't prepared, and you'll need time to grow and develop. You may find yourself struggling with complex thoughts, such as multi-step plans, abstract concepts, time management, and emotional control. You'll probably make a fool of yourself, lose control of your emotions, and cry over stupid things. Self-control will take time, and you'll need to relearn it. But there's something you need to exploit. Children can learn languages faster than adults. If you are fortunate enough, try to learn a bunch of languages. This will depend on other factors, but try it. Now, if you had any bad habits in your past life, you may be able to break them easier as a child. There is an oddity to address though. If you aren't reincarnated as a human, but as a dwarf, an elf, or a lizard man, then it could throw off your cognition due to the differences in the brains of different species. Reptiles, for example, don't have an as developed frontal cortex, but due to the long life of elves, their neural development will likely be slower and take longer. If born as a creature that isn't known for intelligence, you may be limited by that creature's normal cognitive abilities. Yet, if not, you could come off as a savant of the people. But who are you? For most people, you are the combination of all your neurons and synapses, and how they respond to stimuli. For reincarnation to work, your new brain would need to match your old one. And after all we have talked about, do you think it'll happen at once? Probably not. So who will you be? What is likely to be lost? Memories most likely, factual things like a phone number. These are associations due to creating certain synaptic connections between neurons in the brain. There won't be the stimuli which creates them. Basic thought process should pass over, but will unfold in time. Also, short-term memories being lost. This condition, where your cognitive abilities are impaired with memory loss from reincarnation, I like to refer to as Isekai syndrome. Now, we can't be certain that your tastes and preferences won't change. Your sense of taste will be recalibrated with development, and you may find things that you once hated you will now like. Some of that will come from exposure in your new home. Chances are that you will be dependent on your new parents and others for a while. I know it could feel humiliating, but accept it. You'll need time to reach back where you were. Now, what could you bring back from your old life? Any knowledge of technology that you could exploit? What is the technological level of your new world? Better, worse, or the same? How well you are able to bring things from your past into a new world will depend on how many resources you have, your returning memories, and if you can get people to follow you. That will be pretty hard if you're a child, but maybe easier as an adult. It may take time to put a plan into action, years of plotting, collecting resources, and connections. So don't waste your childhood. But as a child, you may be allowed to do things you wouldn't as an adult. People may also say things that they don't want others to hear, particularly when an infant. Now, you won't be able to capitalize on much of it, but you can learn things about people that you wouldn't normally. Now, how long childhood is will depend on the world you are reborn into. In much of the world, particularly those that are more agrarian than the modern world, young children often work on farms. That means you may not get much free time to start with. Yet born into royalty may not be much better. The internal conflicts and struggles among royal branches has been the setting for many series such as Game of Thrones, doubly so with wars. But if you're reborn as a goblin, could you work to establish peace between humans and goblins? Maybe. Depends if you can learn the human language, and if you can get peace talks to go. Overall, those are things to be concerned with, but would be the rules of any world. But why were you reincarnated? I touched on divine intervention, and that could interfere. Why would a god choose you? Are you smart, creative, intuitive? What made a god choose you? Being physically strong wouldn't make sense here, since you get a new body. No, you need a skill or talent which they could use. Did they bring you back to defeat a demon lord, or for entertainment value? If the god doesn't contact you, you'll never find out. But when they do contact you, what happens? Do you follow the god's intervention, or ignore them? Can you ignore them? There is a good chance you can't. You may be their chosen champion to carry out their will. Who knows what that could result in? Your own grand adventure. The idea of reincarnation can be a powerful storytelling method. It allows you to have a novice character that will need the world building and factors explained to them while also catching your audience up, but does limit the individual for the first few years of the story. He blinked. Stretching his arms and legs, he let out a cry of hunger. The heavy footsteps of his parents reverberated through the flooring. Smiling, his mother reached down for her baby, not knowing the intelligence and understanding behind those eyes. "You being needy again, Adam?" she asked while rocking the child. He didn't know what caused it, but he wasn't going to waste this second chance at life. Reincarnation is a strange event. It allows for a second chance and new beginnings. Thank you for watching Adventures. Please return next time, or The Changeling. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.